Welcome to the Me and Money podcast, where your hosts and certified financial planners, Matt Fizell and Elliott Appel, share their thoughts on hot topics, important concepts, and real-life stories in personal finance. Hear from Matt and Elliott as they share lessons learned in their own financial journeys and those they've witnessed throughout their careers while helping clients. Have a question you'd like to hear discussed on a future episode of the podcast? You can reach out to Matt or Elliott or drop your question at the link listed in the show notes. Before we get to the episode, we'd like to remind you that while both Matt and Elliott are financial planners, they are not your financial planner, and this podcast is only intended for educational purposes. For full disclosures, please be sure to listen to the end of the episode or check out the show notes on your favorite podcast platform. Now, on to the show with your hosts, Matt Fizell and Elliott Appel.
Welcome back to another episode of the Me and Money podcast. Elliott, we're here to talk about good old death today.
And I know everybody's excited for that, right?
Yeah, I know you let out a nice big yawn before we hit record today. So he's actually excited. Elliott likes this topic a lot. So
I do. I love estate planning.
Yeah, we're gonna start today, and we're gonna do kind of a mini series on this because there is a lot that goes into an estate plan. We don't want to scare you away with that. But we're going to today just do kind of the 30,000 foot overview of what goes on in an estate plan, why it's important. And then we're going to get into a few more of the specifics as we go throughout this episode. So we wanted to break each component into its own episode, essentially just so that if you do have questions or you're thinking about doing this yourself, like you can come back and find those nice and easy. So why don't we go ahead and kick it off, Elliott? Like, what is an estate plan? Maybe let's start there.
Yeah, I think the way that I would describe it is it gives people the authorization to do things on your behalf and says what you want to have happen at death to your assets. And we'll break that down a little bit further. But it's essentially the legal documents that allow people to do the things that you want them to do when certain things happen, and we can describe what those things are.
Yeah.
How would you describe it?
Yeah. I always like to make the analogy for my clients and, those just doing this for the first time, especially, is it's kind of like building at home furniture. Like, so many times when we get those instructions, like it's really frustrating. Like maybe there's a piece that isn't accurately drawn in the diagram, or you're like, what the heck is that? Or maybe some of the stickers fell off and it's very unclear. But really what an estate plan is it is those instructions, but for your financial life. And typically it's when you can't answer the questions anymore, right? So if you want to get frustrated, right, go to IKEA, take all the labels off everything and tell your spouse good luck. But a lot of times people are approaching that in their finances, I think a lot of times unintentionally, but I think you did a great job. But yeah, just a set of directions for the things that you own when you're no longer able to make the decisions, right?
Now I'm picturing a married couple trying to assemble IKEA furniture without the instructions. I can hardly do it when there are instructions.
That'd be a great idea for premarital counseling. Like how do you handle adversity, right?
Definitely.
But yeah, so why don't you just kick us off with, basically an overview of what that process looks like, or what people should expect when they start to tackle their estate plan.
Yeah, I think it depends which route you go. I usually recommend working with an attorney because I think it's better to get to know an attorney who can draft documents that are more reflective of your wishes. There are certainly online tools that allow you to create your own. But if you read the fine print, it specifically says this is not a law firm. There's no legal advice here. So you're essentially taking the law into your own hands. And my guess is for the most people listening to this, you don't have a law degree and you're not quite sure how the law works when it comes to these documents. So that's the one caveat with online. It can work really well for very, very simple. And I'm talking very simple, no kids, maybe not married, or married but no kids, no other family members really to worry about. Sometimes it might be okay, but again, I would work with an attorney, and each attorney has their different process, but a lot of times they'll meet with you one-on-one, understand it, or have you fill out a questionnaire and then talk about it, draft some documents, you'll go through the draft, and then you'll finalize them, often getting notarized signatures. And then you want to make sure you hold on to those original copies, because those are what you need if something happens to you. If you're to pass away, the original actually does come into play. Sometimes copies can be used for other things, but that's the high level overview.
Yeah, no, I love that. And, I think I'm going to echo what Elliott said with, using an attorney. A lot of times there's a lot of, I guess, apprehension to reaching out to an attorney. Oh, it's expensive. Oh, I'm not that complicated. Like, I think those are, again, just misconceptions. Like, depending on what state you live in, it may just be a little bit more complicated and not indicative of maybe what your friends or family went through when they may have had to deal with those things. So every state's different. Attorneys, again, they're going to know that, like you said. And I mean, even like a good attorney, I feel like you can get a pretty basic package done these days for what, $2,000-$3,000 maybe, unless you're doing like complicated trusts. Like, then sure, you might be getting into the tens of thousands. But I think for most people, you're going to probably be in and out under 5,000, let's say.
Yeah, and just to compare that, like, we've seen people, and you've read stories online of people trying to DIY this, and then once they pass away, the family members end up paying an attorney far more than it would have been just to do the original plan to do it right.
Yeah. Not to mention all the headache that comes with it not being done right as well. So
for sure.
I would agree with you. Like, I think just the amount you can save, like with probate or, court fees or whatever, can usually be recouped, let alone like the time and stress that you just can't get back if it's not done properly.
Definitely. Matt, do you want to take us through one of the documents that's typically included in an estate plan?
Yeah. So like I said, we're not going to go into the specifics of everything today, but just to kind of give the high level overview. So I guess the first one that most people are probably familiar with, other than the one I already said, would be your will, right? So most people, right, if they have anything, that's probably what they have. And so that is going to be, kind of the first kickoff point, shall we say, to the rest of your estate, where you're declaring, what it is that you own, like who you're giving it to, who's to, be the administrator or executor or personal representative of your estate, like who's actually going to help you get things from A to B, or like file your death certificate and things like that. It's also going to direct like what do you want in terms of a funeral or end of life celebration, those kind of things. And just there's a lot of general legalese, right, in those, but also if you have kids, like who's going to care for them and watch over them, and a lot of those logistical things. Is there anything else you'd want to add to that, Elliott?
No, I just think succinctly it tells what happens when you die.
Yeah.
Like what happens to your stuff and who's responsible to make sure it gets to the right people.
Yeah. Yeah. So why don't you pick your next favorite? I guess we're not going in any particular order, but
I'll add to that. Sometimes people will do a revocable or a living trust in coordination with a will. Oftentimes, if you're in a state where probate is expensive, and each state's a little bit different in how this is handled, but I'll pick on California, for example. If you meet people in California, typically they're going to have a will, but ideally everything's going to be titled in the name of the trust, and they're going to have a trust document. And all that is throughout life, your trust is typically going to own assets. So instead of you, person A, owning a bank account, it's your trust owning that, and you are the trustee of that trust. And the reason for that for a lot of folks is, again, California tends to be an expensive state to go through probate. And when you have it in the trust, it essentially eliminates the need for probate if you get everything into the trust. And that's a really big caveat. We'll go into that in more detail in a future episode. But I like the trust planning there if you're in a state where you need it, or you have property in multiple states and you don't want to do probate in multiple states. That can be an effective planning tool.
Yep. And again, we understand there's a lot of jargon already in this episode, but again, this is just the overview. So stay tuned for those other episodes. We're going to help demystify some of those words. They're just a lot of fancy language for pretty simple tasks. But yeah, I guess I'll take the next two. I'll just take the financial power of attorney. I'll maybe stretch this out a little bit and give you the option to scoop up the healthcare side if you want. But that the financial power of attorney, again, these are usually like, you can almost do these for free with little to no issue. Most states have on their, financial institution website. So like here in Wisconsin, it's the Department of, financial institutions or whatever. But they'll have like a free template that you can use. So, the power of attorney form, that's really just there to help set rules for who can help you if you're unable to make some of these decisions for yourself. So typically this is before you've actually passed away, but maybe you're dealing with significant mental decline, or you were in a really bad car accident, now you're in a coma, or whatever, right? It doesn't have to be those extreme examples, but just essentially you're unable to make those financial decisions for yourself. You need some help paying your bills, not necessarily from a financial standpoint, but to actually make sure, the credit card and the utilities get paid on time, that kind of thing. And that's something that, you can set those parameters. I've seen it done a couple of different ways where, maybe you want two physicians to independently say, hey, like, they shouldn't be making these decisions anymore. Or, with a case like with my dad, for example, he was just really struggling to keep track of all this stuff. And that was something he just wanted to grant me the ability to do now. So you can do that. And I think this is super, super important, especially with the level of, cybercrime and online fraud that's going on these days. Like, it can be very helpful if you have someone who's aging or just unsure, or maybe not necessarily the most detail oriented, to kind of be that line of defense for them. Is there anything you would add there, Elliott?
No, I just want to reiterate that I think knowing and understanding what type of power of attorney you have. So if it's a durable power of attorney, is it effective immediately, like you just talked about, or is it springing where someone has to certify that you're incapacitated? That's a very important distinction, because what happens in the legal world and what happens in the real world can be very different when it comes to that. And we'll talk about that more in a future episode.
Yeah. So I took the financial one. Why don't we just swing back and let you take a shot at the healthcare?
Yeah. So healthcare or medical power of attorney, essentially what happens if you're unable to make those choices? Who are you appointing to make those choices? So if you're, let's say you're hooked up to a ventilator in the hospital and you can't really communicate and outline what you want to have happen, who's taking the place to make those really tough medical choices?
Yeah. And Elliott, we've actually never really talked about this like strategically, but I want to save that for the episode where we talk about those documents specifically. I'm really curious, like, how you help your clients have those discussions as to who they might want to put there. In separation of roles. So
definitely
that can be a fun one. That was pretty short. So why don't you take, the living will or advanced directives as well?
Yeah, also a short one. Essentially, it outlines for the person you name in your medical power of what sort of things you want to have happen. You can kind of think of that as a roadmap of, I want nutrition or I don't want nutrition under these circumstances. I can't talk today. I want hydration under these, or I want pain medication, or those sort of things. It's essentially outlining what sort of care you'd want to help them make those decisions throughout that.
Yeah. And I just want to add, because like those are kind of weird terms, like nutrition and hydration. Like, again, these are typically in situations where you're on like medical support. Like, of course, you want to be fed and, I guess, watered, so to speak, if you're still healthy. But that's typically like if you're on some form of life support, right, Elliott?
Definitely.
Yeah. All right. And I'll just add to that, just to put a bow on the medical side, sometimes just getting access to medical records can be a real challenge, especially with, how fragmented healthcare can be. So having a HIPAA authorization form just to allow access for you to view those records. Again, this is something I have with my dad, so I have a separate login to his MyChart, and I can call the doctor and ask questions like, you said this in your notes, but he's saying that, like, which is it? Like, what should we be doing here? And again, if you're with someone who has extensive medical needs and they have different providers and specialists, like, this may be something you need to do at each individual clinic. So I just want to point that out, and getting those in place now or before severe decline happens is paramount. So,
yeah. And while you're doing that at each institution, if you have the medical power of attorney, go ahead and send that to the institution as well. So that's on file. That can be helpful.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Anything else, Elliott?
Maybe digital records. We could talk about that. And this isn't necessarily estate planning so much as, do you have a document or some sort of established procedure that if something happens to you, do you have a roadmap for someone else to take over your life? So whether that's account logins or access to utilities, where is your actual estate plan? Is it with your attorney's office? Did you put in a safe deposit box? Which, spoiler alert, it's not a great place to usually keep that. Is it at your house? Is it in a safe? Is it in a safe at your house? How do you actually access the safe? So think about all the things that you know that's up in your head. How would someone actually take over your life or gain access to those things if they needed to?
Yeah. And I'll actually include a copy of the one that I share with my clients. It's just something I've made a few years back, but I don't know. There's probably too much in there, but I mean, even being able to direct people as to where they can call to let their employer know that they've died. Those are things that a lot of people don't think about. And then it's kind of the scramble and almost like detective work that you have to do to, trace everything back to its final point. Right. So there's a lot in there, and hopefully you can find that valuable. And I guess the last tip I would give with that is, whether you're a parent listening to this, that's being kind to your children. But if you're a child and your parents are still alive, this could also be a really great way to start having some of those discussions with your parents and understanding what your role is, and being kind to your future self, just to make sure that if and when that does happen, that you're prepared and it's not going to be an incredible amount of stress while you're still trying to grieve that loss.
Well said.
Yeah. Anything you want to wrap up with today, Elliott?
I would just reiterate, these documents are super important. It can be intimidating. It's hard to get that first step. I think we've both experienced that with folks over the years, but you're doing people a real disservice if you don't have these documents. And I just say that bluntly because we know people who haven't, and it's not great when emergencies happen or you die. So take that first step, talk to an attorney, do something to at least get the ball rolling on this.
Yeah. And something is better than nothing. So I know at the start, Elliott, you mentioned you prefer an attorney, but I'll go on record saying if you can't get it, or it's maybe out of your price range right now, just get something done. Something is almost always better than nothing in this case. So having something is going to go a long way. If you can't get it perfect, good is better than perfect in that situation.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll see you all in the upcoming mini-series. And if you have any questions that you'd want us to answer during that mini-series, feel free to drop it in the comments or send us an email.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Me and Money podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. Have a question you'd like to suggest for a future episode? Drop Matt or Elliott a question at their email, or use the linked form in the show notes. Like what you heard? It would be a tremendous help to us in our mission of having real conversations about personal finance by leaving us a review on your favorite podcast app. A few words can go a long way in connecting those looking for content like ours on their app of choice. You can also support the show by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Thanks again for listening, and be on the lookout for future episodes soon.
The Me and Money podcast is hosted and produced by Harmony Outsourcing Services LLC. Matt Fizell is an investment advisor representative of Harmony Wealth LLC. Elliott Appel is an investment advisor representative of Kindness Financial Planning LLC. However, the views and opinions expressed by Matt and Elliott in this podcast are not intended as individualized investment advice on behalf of Harmony or Kindness, or as tax, accounting, or legal advice. Although we gather information from sources that we deem to be reliable, we cannot guarantee the accuracy, timeliness, or completeness of any information prepared by any unaffiliated third party. When specific investments or types of investments are mentioned, such mention is not intended to be a recommendation or endorsement to buy or sell the specific investment. Harmony is a registered investment advisor authorized to do business in the states of Wisconsin and Texas and other jurisdictions where exempted. Kindness is a registered investment advisor authorized to do business in Wisconsin and Washington and in other jurisdictions where exempted. Registration as a registered investment advisor does not imply a certain level of skill or training. This website contains links to the Harmony and Kindness websites that provide general information about the advisory services offered by Harmony and Kindness. These links are provided as a convenience only. Harmony and Kindness can only provide individualized services after you sign an agreement and receive required disclosures. Users of this website may, but are not required to, engage the services of Harmony or Kindness for advisory services. Please remember that all investments involve varying degrees of risk, and the future performance of any specific investment or investment strategy is not guaranteed to be profitable or equal to any historical performances. As a final note, we'd encourage you to reach out to your financial professionals before implementing any of the strategies or concepts discussed in this podcast. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.